Hello everyone, welcome to Vab Fashion's YouTube channel. My name is Eunice. It is so good to have you here on my channel. If this is your first time stopping by, please kindly click on the subscribe button to subscribe and ensure to put on your notification bell so you receive a notification every time I upload a new video. And if you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for always coming back to watch my videos. Thank you, I really appreciate. In this video, I'm going to be showing us how I made this beautiful gown you see right here on the mannequin. It's a combination of Ankara and crepe fabric. The upper part of this gown is a shoulder princess bustier, and you can see it has a collar on the neckline. The down part is pleated, and it has these fancy pockets you see on both sides, just a little above the hip line. This gown is really beautiful and stylish, and it is very simple to make. I hope this is something you are interested in learning. If this is it, please make sure to keep on watching till the end. Thank you, and let's get right into the video. I'll be drafting directly on my lining, and here I have folded my lining into two, and I've marked the starting line, which is the shoulder line. So from the shoulder line, I'm going to mark the chest line, which is 9 inches. Next, I'm going to mark the bust point line, which is the nipple point. I'll mark it here. Next, I'll mark the underbust line, and then I'll go ahead and mark the waistline, and then I'll also mark the hip line. The Ankara will be stopping exactly on the hip line before the pleated part. So right now I'm going to mark the hip line, which is 24 inches. So instead of marking on 24 inches exactly, I'll be adding half inch for my sewing allowance that I'll be using to join the pleats to the upper part. So here I'm marking on 24.5. Next, I'll go ahead and straighten out all my vertical lines. So having done that, I'll go ahead and label the line. The first line is his chest line, the second is the bust line, under bust, waistline, and hip line. So I'll come to the shoulder line and mark the shoulder measurement divided by 2 plus half inch. So I'm marking on 8.5. Then I'll go ahead and mark the neck width of 3 inches. So from the shoulder measurement, I'll come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slant. I'll use my straight ruler to connect it to the neck width. Then on the chest line, I'm going to enter the shoulder measurement divided by 2 plus half inch. I'll use my straight ruler to connect it to the shoulder line. So now this is going to be our front armhole. The next thing I'm going to do is to get the midpoint of the armhole. And this is the midpoint here. I'll go in by 3/4 inch. This is to eliminate any gathering around the armhole area. So this 3/4 inch, I'll connect it to the shoulder tip. And then to curve the armhole to meet the chest line, I'm first going to enter the bust measurement divided by 4 there. And having done that, I'll bring in my armhole curve and connect it just like this. So now we have our front armhole. So the next thing I'm going to do is to enter the bust span, which is the nipple to nipple measurement. And the nipple to nipple is 8 inches. So 8 divided by 2 is 4 plus half inch. So I'm adding half inch to this measurement. Half inch is for my stitching allowance. So I'm marking 4.5 inches across all the lines, excluding the chest line. So I'm marking it from the bust line to the hip line. I'll use my straight ruler to connect all the 4.5 inches mark, and this is it here. Next, I'll move on to tightening the underbust. So to tighten the underbust, I'm going to use the difference between the bust and the underbust. Now this is it. The bust measurement I'm working with is 40 inches. 40 divided by 4 is 10. The underbust measurement is 34 inches. 34 divided by 4 is 8.5. So I'm going to subtract 8.5 from 10, and I'll use the difference to tighten the underbust. So 10 minus 8.5 is 1.5. So I'll be using 1.5 to tighten the underbust. So here at the center piece, I'm marking half inch across all the lines from the underbust to the waist and then to the hip line. And then at the side piece, I'm marking the remaining 1 inch. So that's giving me a total of 1.5, which is what we're supposed to use to tighten the underbust. So you can see I'm using my straight ruler to connect the points all the way down to the hip line. So now you can see we have tightened our underbust with 1.5. So next I'll come down from the bust point line with half inch. Can you see? And then I'll bring in my armhole curve and connect it from this half inch mark to that's to the underbust line like this using my armhole curve. So the essence of coming down by half inch is so that you don't have any pointiness on the bust point. Okay, so I'll also curve to connect the other side, which is the center side. So next I'm going to mark the neck width, which I already did, which is 3 inches. I'll come down by same neck depth of 3 inches, and then I'll draw out the neckline just like this. So having done this, I'll get the midpoint from the neck width to the shoulder tip. I'll get the midpoint there by placing my tape this way. So I'll just fold it into two, and now I have the midpoint. So having got the midpoint, I'll bring in my straight ruler and connect from this midpoint of the shoulder to the bust point, just like this. So having done that, next I'm going to do a dart intake of half inch on both sides of this line. So I'll mark half inch to the left and mark half inch to the right. And then I'll also bring in my straight ruler and connect it to the bust point like this. So now that this is done, we have done our shoulder dart intake. So all the darts we have taken out, we need to replace it. If you don't replace it, there's going to be a shortage. So starting from the shoulder line, you can see I have a dart intake of 1 inch. I'm going to extend the shoulder slant by 1 inch. So this mark I'm creating here just indicates that we're going to be cutting this part out. So if we don't replace it back, by the time we cut out, we're going to have a shortage. Remember, I'm drafting on my lining. So on the shoulder slant here, I'm coming out by extra 1 inch. Can you see? 1 inch. So I've come out by 1 inch, so which has replaced the dart that I have lost. Then the next thing I'm going to do is also to add the sewing allowance I'll be using to stitch them together. I'll be stitching with half inch on both sides, so that's a total of 1 inch. So you can see that I extended the shoulder slant by 2 inches. This means that by the time I cut out the 1 inch dart, it has replaced it back, and I also have my stitching allowance I'll be using to stitch them back. So now I'll come to the midpoint of the armhole and measure what I have here at the dart. I have 3/4 inch. So following the armhole curve, I'll come out by that 3/4 inch. As you can see, as the dart is going down, it's becoming smaller. So at that part, I have 3/4 inch. So I've replaced back that 3/4 inch. I also need half inch to join them on both sides. So that's 1 inch. So I also went ahead to replace back that 1 inch. So here also at close to the end of the armhole, here I have just half inch. I replaced back the half inch, and I'm also going to add the 1 inch I'll be using to join them together. Can you see? This is it. So you can see all the points I marked. So here on the chest line, I will also do the same thing by coming out by 1 inch at the armhole area here, because we're going to be using half inch to join them together. Okay, so I'll just come out there also and replace what I am losing. And you see, so I came out by 1 inch at that point, which is what I'll be using to join the center piece and the side piece together. Can you see that by placing my armhole curve, all the points are meeting? If you do this correctly, all your points will meet, because everything I replace back is exactly what I will cut out. And then I went ahead to add my 1 inch, which is the sewing allowance for both sides, both the center and the side. And as you can see, I extended the shoulder slant to meet the new armhole. So the old armhole, or the one that we're not going to be cutting on, that's the one I X'd. This is to indicate that we won't be cutting on that old armhole, so we'll be cutting on the new armhole. So next I went ahead to enter the bust measurement divided by 4 here on the bust line. And then I'll go ahead and add my 2 inches for sewing allowance. And then I'll also add half inch for joining the both sides together, so which is automatically 3 inches. If you don't want to add as much as 3 inches, please just add your 2 inches, it's fine. But I like to work with 2 inches sewing allowance and then half inch on both sides for joining them together, which makes it 1 inch. Okay, so now on the underbust line, the underbust measurement divided by 4 is 8.5. So after marking my 8.5, I went ahead to replace the dart intake of 1.5, and then I added my sewing allowance here of that same 3 inches I added to the bust line. So here on the waistline, I'm doing the same thing. You want to make sure to replace the dart intake. That 1.5, you must add it back. If you don't add it back, you're going to have a shortage. On the hip line, I entered the hip measurement, and then I also replaced the dart intake of 1.5, and then I'm also going ahead to add my sewing allowance of same 3 inches. Okay, so here I'm using 3 inches. 2 inches is my actual sewing allowance. 1 inch is for joining the center piece and the side piece together. I'm also going to use half inch to turn my lining. So at the end of the day, I'm just left with 1.5 inches sewing allowance, which is fine. Okay, so you can see I've connected the points. So here at the hem of the blouse, I'm going up by 1 inch just to give it a nice curve at the end. And then I'm going to connect it to the first dart leg. And this is it. So right now I'm going to bring in my scissors so that we can cut out our front pattern. So this is what our front pieces looks like. So it is always advisable to just notch the bust point, just so that you know which part is the bust point. You want to make sure that when you are joining, you join it well to notch the bust point. So for the under bust point, we're going to notch it when we have joined. It is obvious. It is very obvious. That's the part that goes in the most. So I'm going to fold my fabric so that we can draft the back piece. So to draft the back piece, I folded my fabric. I have marked the shoulder line. This is the starting line. So from this folded part, I'm going to come in by 1 inch, and this 1 inch is going to be for my zip allowance. So I'll mark out the zip allowance line. I'm going to mark the chest line, which is 9 inches. Next, I'm going to mark the back waistline, and that is 15 inches. And then I'm going to mark the hip line, and that's 24 inches. So plus half inch, just like I did for the front. So that's 24.5. I'm going to rule out my lines. CL, waistline, and then hip line. So we don't need bust line at the back or under bust since we don't have them at the back. So here on the shoulder line, this now is our starting, that's our center back line. These are center back line. So all my measurements will start away from the 1 inch I marked. So here on the shoulder line, I'm going to mark the shoulder measurement divided by 2 plus half inch, and that's 8.5. So I'll mark 8.5 here, and I'll do the same thing here on the chest line. So having done that, on the shoulder line here, I'm going to mark a neck width of same 3 inches like I did for the front. Then I'll come down by 1 inch here at the shoulder measurement for the back shoulder slant. And then I'm going to connect it to the neck width. I'm going to use my straight ruler to connect from the chest line to the shoulder slant like this. So this is now the back armhole. So here, I'll get the midpoint of the back armhole, and this is the midpoint. I'll go in by half inch. I'll use my straight ruler to connect it to the shoulder tip like this. And then on the chest line, I'm going to enter the bust measurement divided by 4. And then I'll bring in my armhole curve and connect the back armhole just like this. So now we have the back armhole. So the next thing I'm going to do is to mark the bust pan, the nipple to nipple, just like I did for the front. The nipple to nipple is 8 inches. When you divide by 2, the nipple to nipple is 8 inches. Divided by 2, that's 4 inches. So plus half inch, that's 4.5. So I'll mark 4.5. Please take note, I'm taking my measurement from the center back here. I'll mark 4.5 on the chest line, and I'll also mark it here on the hip line. And then I'm going to use my straight ruler to connect the points like this. You see? So the next thing I'm going to do is to take our dart. So this is our waistline here. So this is the center back, and this is going to be the side back. So here on this side, I'm going to mark half inch. And then on this other side, I'll mark the same half inch. So a dart intake of 1 inch, half inch on both sides. And I'll connect it like this. I'm going to be connecting it down to the hip line like this. And then I'll also do the same thing like this. Do you see?
So on this other side, that's on the upper part now, I'm going to connect to the upper part like this, and then I'll also do the same thing. So now we have our back waist dart. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to mark the neck depth of 1 inch. So the back neck depth is going to be 1 inch. I'll use my curved ruler to connect it like this. So this is our back neckline. I'll extend it all the way into the zip allowance. So next I'll get the midpoint of the shoulder slant. That's from the neck width to the shoulder tip here. I'll fold my tape and get the midpoint. So once we have the midpoint here, this is it. So I'm going to bring in my ruler just like I did for the back, and I'll connect it to the chest line. You see? So this is what we're going to have at the back. I won't be doing any dart intake. I won't be marking ½ inch on both sides. But this is what we're going to do, because we'll be cutting out this line. We'll be cutting open this line and cut out our dart. I'll be replacing back the sewing allowance I'll be using to stitch them back together. So I'll be using ½ inch to stitch the center back and the side back together. So that means I need 1 inch. So here on the shoulder slant, I'm going to come out by extra 1 inch. Please take note of where I'm placing my tape. I'm placing it from the curve here of the armhole. So I'll mark 1 inch like this. On this side too, I'm going to replace it because I'll join them back. So I'm just going to come out by 1 inch following the armhole curve. So 1 inch is just what I am adding. Okay, so 1 inch round. So I'll bring in my armhole curve and connect the points like this. And you see that by placing my armhole this way, and you see all the points are touching. It's touching this point, and then to this point. So now this is going to be our new back armhole. That's the original armhole we're going to be working with. So this part we're not going to be using this. Okay, so I'll go ahead and extend the shoulder slant to meet the new armhole. So we'll be working with this new armhole. So the next thing I'm going to do is to enter all the circumferences. So the bust divided by 4, which I already entered here, and I've added the 1 inch we'll be using to join it back. So I'll add my 2 inches for sewing allowance. 2 inches. Okay, so 2 inches, and we also need ½ inch to join them together. Remember that the bust already has its own. That's the chest line. I've already added that 1 inch here, so that means I've added 3 inches here already. So on the waistline, the waist divided by 4 is 8.5. So this is it. I'll be replacing the dart intake of 1 inch. I'll bring it back here, and then I'll go ahead and add my sewing allowance of 2 inches. I will also need 1 inch for joining them together. So you must replace back everything you had cutting out. So the hip measurement divided by 4 is 10.5. So I'm going to add here. We're not going to, you can see that we don't have any dart here. All we need is just the ½ inch we'll be using to join them together. That's 1 inch, ½ inch on this side, ½ inch on this side. That's 1 inch. So I'll replace that 1 inch, and then I'll add my sewing allowance of 2 inches. Okay, so that's a total of 3 inches. So this is my sewing allowance of 2 inches. Please ignore this. This is where it ends. So then I'll bring in my pattern master and connect the points like this. So this is it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do now is to eliminate zipper bulge. We don't want our gown to bulge at the back. So to do that, at the center back here, can you see this is the waistline, and then this is our zip allowance. I have a zip allowance of 1 inch, so I'll come in by ½ inch. So by coming in by ½ inch, I'm left with just ½ inch. Okay, so this is to eliminate zipper bulge. Then I'll go ahead and use my straight ruler to connect it to the starting point, that's to the shoulder line like this. You see? And then I'll also do the same thing here. I'll connect it to the hip line. So we'll be cutting out this part. This is to avoid having any bulge at the back. I'll also come here to the side and go up by 1 inch, just like I did for the front. And then I'll connect it to the first dart leg. That's just to the dart here. And this is it. So now we are done drafting the back. So we'll go ahead and cut it out. So here I'm cutting out the zipper bulge. So please take note of this. You can see that we have cut out the zipper bulge, so we're just left with ½ inch. So this doesn't mean that when I'm stitching my zip, I'll stitch on ½ inch. I will still stitch on that 1 inch. So that this now means that it will come into the actual measurement, so that it will eliminate any form of bulge at the back. If you just stitch on the ½ inch, that means you have not eliminated any bulge, so it will still fold at the back. So this just means that we have to come into our actual measurement. So that way you are going to be eliminating the zipper bulge. So let's just mark it from here. So you can see I'm going to mark 1 inch from this point. Can you see how much I will come into the waistline at the back? So by doing this, let me also come here. Can see that this part, I'm still maintaining my 1 inch here. So now this means that this is now going to be our zipper allowance. Okay, You see, so the zip allowance now came in. So you can see how it has reduced this part. So that way it will not bulge at the back. So with that being said, let's go ahead and keep cutting. So I'm cutting on the new armhole. Cutting out, and this is what we have here. So we're done drafting the front and the back. So I'm going to place this on my Ankara fabric and cut out the Ankara pieces, and I'll show us the next thing to do. Okay, I'm done cutting out our fabric, and I've ironed stayed to both the lining and fabric. So I ironed stayed to my main fabric, and I also ironed to the lining on all the pieces, both the front and back. I also went ahead to cut out the basic sleeve. It's just a basic sleeve. I've cut it out. So the next thing we're going to do now is to cut the fabric we're going to pleat at the down part before we go ahead and start stitching all our pieces together. So I'm going to set this one aside and bring in the fabric we'll be using for the pleats at the down part. And to determine the amount of fabric we're working with, the pleat is going to be on the hip line. That's where the length of the top ends, which is on the hip line. We're going to be pleating on the hip line. So to determine the amount of fabric we're going to pleat, I'm going to multiply the hip circumference by 3. And we're working with a hip circumference of 42 inches. So 42 times 3, that will give us 42 times 3, that will give us 126 inches. So 126 inches is the width of the fabric we're going to be pleating around the hip line. And we also need a zip allowance of 1 inch on the left and 1 inch on the right. That's a total of 2 inches. So I'll add 2 inches to this measurement, and that's 128 inches. So that is the width of the fabric we're going to be pleating. So now for the length, to determine the length, the full length of the gown is 42 inches. That's the full length of the gown, 42 inches. We already have the upper part, which stops at 24 inches. Remember, I used 24.5, but that half inch is for my joining allowance. So we're looking, that means we have 24 inches. So I'm going to subtract 24 inches from this 42 inches, which is her full length. So 42 minus 24 inches, I'm left with 18 inches. We need a hemming allowance of 2 inches. So plus 2 inches, that's 20 inches. And we also need half inch joining allowance that we'll be using to join it to the upper part. So that's plus 0.5, and that is 20.5 inches. So the length of the pleat, the length of the fabric we're going to be pleating is 20.5 inches, while the width is 128 inches. So I'm going to cut out the fabric and show us the next thing to do. Okay, so I'm done cutting out the fabric we'll be using for our pleats. So here you can see I have 2 pieces. This is because my fabric is not enough to give me that long length. I'm working with 2 yards of crepe, so I had to cut 2 pieces to join them together to achieve that 128 inches. The length I have is 20.5. The width, by the time we join them together, it will give me 128 inches. So I have 2 pieces that will be joining together for the pleats. So I'll drop my fabric aside so that we can cut the stylish pocket cover that we're going to have on the hip line. So here my fabric is on fold, and see, it's on fold. And then I'm going to fold again so that I can cut the 2 at the same time for both the left and the right. So I'm going to measure a width of 6.5 inches. That's including my sewing allowance. So this is 6.5 here. So this is my 6.5. And then the length is also going to be the same 6.5. So this is 6.5 as well. I'll bring in my straight ruler and connect, just rule a straight line here. And this is it here. So I'll go ahead and cut it out. I haven't cut it out. I'm just going to slash here so that I have the 4 pieces. Okay. So after doing that, I'm going to fold my fabric now into 2 again. So that's basically folding it into 8. And then this is the down part. I'm going to come up by 1 inch just to create a slant here. 1 inch is fine, 3/4 inch is fine, but I'm doing 1 inch. And then I'll slant it to the center. This is the open part and this is the center part. So I'll slant it to the center like this. This is just so that the down part of the pocket cover is stylish. You don't want to leave it straight. So I'll go ahead and cut out this slanted shape I have here. You see? So this is just what we want to have, or this is just what I want to have. And this part that is folded, I'm going to slash it open so that we can sew them together. So this is going to be for the right and this is going to be for the left. So now we are done with the cutting part. So we'll go ahead and start sewing. Before it's after we have sewn that we're going to cut the collar, okay, and the flap that we're going to have in front. So I'll keep this pocket aside. It will come in later. So let's bring in our bustier so that will show us how we'll be stitching them together. All right, so these are the front pieces. I'm not going to be padding this bustier. So I ironed stay to both the lining and fabric. I already said that. So I'll bring in the center piece now. This is the front center piece, and this is our side piece, the front side pieces. And see, so I'm going to place right side facing right side. This is the side now over the center, and I'll start stitching from the down part. I'll stitch on half inch, which is the sewing allowance I added. I'll stitch it all the way to the shoulder line, and then I'll have it this way. I'll repeat the same thing on this side. Stitch on half inch all the way to the shoulder line. Exactly what I'm doing on the main fabric is what I will repeat on the lining. And then for the back piece, these are center back piece. This center back, this is it, like this. So these are the two center back pieces, and this is the side, and this is the side as well. So I'm going to place this on the right side facing right side, and I'll stitch on half inch all the way to the shoulder line. Then I'll have this on this side. I'll repeat the same thing on the other side, stitch on half inch all the way to the shoulder line. I'll repeat the same thing on the lining. But for the back piece, I'm going to have to place the lining, right side of the lining facing right side of the fabric, and I'll turn the center back here, the center back and also the side back. I won't be turning the neckline. I'll go do that and then I'll come back and show us the next thing to do. So right now I'm done joining the bustier, both the lining and fabric. As you can see, I ironed the seam lines open. I did the same thing on the main fabric. This is not padded because I don't want it padded. So if you want to pad it up, you can pad it up. But you can see that the bust area, the cup is coming out really well, despite the fact that it is not padded. You can see this is the under bust. It's very obvious, and you can see what we have here. So I also repeated the same thing for the back. I joined the pieces together, both lining and fabric, fabric to fabric, lining to lining. I repeated the same thing on the other side. On the other side of the back, you can see, and I also iron my seam lines open. So I went ahead to join the shoulders. You see, I've joined the shoulders together, and I also stitched the armhole together. That's to stitch the lining and fabric together. So for the neckline, you can see I didn't turn the neckline. All I did was to just stitch the fabric and the lining together, because we're going to have a collar sitting on this neckline. So there's no need turning the neckline with the lining. Okay, so I'm going to have this placket that will sit at the center here. It's just going to be like a placket, okay, but it will not have the buttons for opening, so it's more like fancy. So here I cut out this piece of fabric. The length of my fabric is about 17 inches, which will get to the waistline. You can see this is 17 inches to get to the waistline. Then I also went ahead to, the fabric is 1.5 inches on fold. This was how I cut it. Then I folded half inch this way, half inch this way. So that means the width of the fabric now I have is 2 inches. Okay, so at this down part, I folded in half inch like this. So for the upper part, this is what I have. This is the part that will go into the neckline, and this is the down part of the placket. So if you take a close look, you'll notice that I notched it to get the center. As I folded it into two to notch to get the center so that the placket is centralized. And then also for the front neckline, all I need to do is to hold the shoulders together like this, and then notch the center as well. So having notched the middle, I'm going to place the bustier like this. This is the front piece now. And then I'll bring in the placket. So I'll place the placket, making sure that the notched part, the midpoint of the placket, aligns with the center front. I'm going to place it in a way that will leave excess of about 3/4 of an inch. This is so that we can shape it into the neckline because it is straight. So I'll go ahead and pin it like this. So I haven't pinned it. You want to make sure that you're placing the placket that it is centralized. You don't want it tilting to one side. So a very simple way to do that is to measure from the dart line I have here, and measure the distance from here to the beginning of the placket here. I have 2.5 inches. I will confirm the other side and see if I have up to the same 2.5 inches. So here at this side, I have 2.5 inches as well. Can you see? So here, 2.5 inches and then 2.5 inches. So I'm going to use my pins to secure it. You want to do this gently, gently. You can use your hemming gum to gum it down so that it's easy for you to stitch. and it is even better to do it when you have not joined the lining. Remember, I've joined my lining together, so it is easier to work with it when you have not joined the lining, so that you are dealing with only the Ankara fabric. So for me, I'm doing it on both the lining and fabric. So my stitch is going to show at the back of the lining. So I'll pin it. So here we are. I haven't secured with my pin. I'll take this to my sewing machine and then stitch it. I'll top stitch on this side, turn to this side, then top stitch it all the way to the neckline. Then I'll come back and show us the next thing to do. So this is what we have after top stitching our placket, and see how relaxed it is. I went ahead to give it a good press. Then I also went ahead to fix the basic sleeve, and see, and then I wove the rough parts. You don't want to leave your work rough, and this is what it looks like on the inside. So the next thing now we're going to do before creating the pleat is to place the fancy pocket. I choose to call it a fancy pocket because we're actually not going to put our hands inside the pocket. So already, as you can see, I've turned the pocket on all the sides, and then I turned it inside out. Then I went ahead to tuck in this part with 1/2 inch. And you see, I just tucked it in with 1/2 inch and gave it a good press so that it's well relaxed. I repeated the same thing for the second piece. So now to place the fancy pocket, I'm going to go up from the hem of the top by 2 inches. So I'll be going up from this point by 2 inches. I'll mark it here. So this is where my 2 inches is. Please take note that I'm using the dart line. Okay, that's the centerpiece line. So this is the side I'll have the pocket. So on this side also, I'll go up by the same 2 inches. So I'll just place the pocket like this. You see, this is my 2 inches mark. I'll place the pocket just like this and pin it down. I'm placing the tip of the pocket exactly on the 2 inches mark I drew there. I'll place it this way, just pin, and this is it. For the other side, I'm going to repeat the same thing. Also make sure that it's on the mark on the place I marked. I will stitch this like this. I'm going to be stitching on 1/2 inch. So by the time I'm stitching on it, it will stitch down the 1/2 inch I tucked in. Then we'll have the pocket sitting like this. And then we'll have it also just like this. Okay. So before I go ahead and do that, let me show us how to create our pleats. So remember that we are working with the measurement we have here. That's the hip measurement. So I'm just going to measure everything I have here, including the zip allowance. Okay, so in total here I have 44 inches. That's including the zip allowance. Remember, the hip measurement of my client is 42 inches, so plus 2 inches, that's 44. 1 inch for zip allowance on this side, 1 inch on the other side. So now to create our pleats, here is our fabric. I've already gone ahead to join them together. I made sure to join it neatly so that I have a long fabric. This is the wrong side and this is the right side. You can see it is very neat. And then I also went ahead to hem the down part. So I've hemmed the down part. You want to make sure to hem it before you start creating the pleats. So now this is the right side of my fabric. Remember, we have already calculated our measurements. Okay, so this is the right side of the fabric. I'll be creating my knife pleats towards the right. Okay, I'll be taking it towards the right. So first I'm going to measure the zip allowance of 1 inch. So now this point is going to be my zip allowance of 1 inch. So you have to determine the width of the pleat you want to have. In this case, I'm going to have a pleat of 2 inches. So it can be 1 inch, it can be 2 inches, it can be 1.5, it can also be 3 inches. So just determine how wide you want the pleat to be. So from this 1 inch zip allowance I already marked, I'm going to measure 2 inches and mark here at 2 inches. So this is the first 2 inches point. I'll also measure another 2 inches and then measure another 2 inches. So that's 3 places. Okay, so then I'm going to pick this first one. This is the first point. I'm going to pick it and fold it this way, so it will overlap. Can you see? I'll fold it and then bring it to this point, to the last one. So this is the first pleat here. I'll pin it down, then I'll go ahead and measure the second one. 2 inches, 2 inches, and then 2 inches again. So I'll pick the first one, just fold it this way to overlap on the last one. And you see, So this is what I'll keep doing till I get to the end of my fabric. And of course, this will bring me back to the 42 inches, which is the hip measurement we are working with. So I'll go do that and give it a good press and show us the next thing to do. So here is my pleat. I'm done pleating it, and you can see I've also gone ahead to give it a very good press, and it's sitting very well. So here the width of the pleat I have is 44 inches. You can see the space of 1 inch I left here at the end, and I have the same thing here. So that 1 inch is going to be for our zip allowance on both sides. So by the time we stitch 1 inch on this side, 1 inch on this side, we are left with the actual hip measurement, which is 42 inches. Okay, so next I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and first of all stitch it down, just to hold it down first on the upper part. This part is the hem. I'll stitch it down and hold it down first. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to place the upper bodice. That's after I must have stitched the pocket already. Okay, I'll place the upper bodice over it like this, right side facing right side of the pleats, and then I'm going to stitch on half inch, joining them together at this point using half inch, which is my sewing allowance. I'll do that and weave the waistline, then I'll fix my zipper and come back and show us the next thing to do. To the hem of the Ankara, this is what we have, and you see how beautiful it came out. I'm still going to iron it very well when we are done. And this is what our pockets, the fancy pockets, can see what it looks like. So it's just overlapping on top of the pleats. And for the back, this is it for the back. I've gone ahead to fix my zipper. So from the neckline to 22 inches is where the zipper is. So I went ahead to stitch close the down part. So I just stitched it using the 1 inch zip allowance I added. So this is it. And see, this is what it looks like on the inside. So the last thing we're going to be doing now is to cut the collar, and then our gown is ready after stitching the collar. So I'm going to measure the neckline. Take note that my zipper, the zipper is closed. I'm going to measure the neckline. Just fold into two like this. Then I'll measure the neckline to the back here, and I have 9 inches. I have 9 inches, so that means I have 18 inches on both sides. That's when we measure on both sides, so that's 18 inches. So 9 inches in two places. So I'll bring in my leftover Ankara fabric, and this is it here. So I'm going to fold my fabric in a triangular shape like this to cut the collar. So having folded the fabric, from the apex of the fabric, I'm going to measure that same 9 inches I got on the neckline. So placing my tape from here, I'll measure 9 inches. So I haven't got the 9 inches. The next thing I'm going to do is to measure the length of the collar. And this collar is going to be 2 inches, including the sewing allowance. So by the time I'm done sewing the collar, I'll just have 1 inch on the neckline. So I'm coming down from this mark I have here now by 2 inches. So this is the upper part of the collar, and this will be the down part of the collar that will be stitching to the neckline. So now, to be sure that this will go around the neckline, you need to take your measurement. So I'll place my tape from here and measure. I'm measuring the down part now. So here I have 10 inches. So now you can see it has given me plus my sewing allowance, okay, that I'll be using to turn the collar. So this is very simple. At the upper part here, I'm going to have less than that 9 inches, and this will be the upper part of the neckline so that it sits well. And here what I have here is 8 inches. So you can see it's less than the 9 inches I measured around the neckline. So this is the base of the collar. This is the wider part that will be stitched to the down part of the collar, and this is the upper part that will give it that narrow effect so that it sits well on the neckline. So with that being said, I'll cut out the collar. So this is what our collar looks like. Can you see? So it will sit well and balance well on the neckline. So I need 2 pieces of this. I'm going to cut the second piece, and I'll cut my gum stay, lightweight gum stay. I'll be ironing lightweight gum stay to this collar. So you can use your hair stay, you can use your paper stay, whichever one. So I'm going to iron it to both the lining and fabric. One will serve as lining and one will serve as the fabric. I'll do that. Here is the collar. After ironing my gum stay to both the lining and fabric, I went ahead to stitch the upper part on half inch. Remember, this was how it was. So I stitched the upper part on half inch. Then I went ahead to reduce the seam allowance, and I also notched it. This is so that the curved part can relax very well. So after pressing it, I flipped it this way to the right side like this. And you see? Then I went ahead to fold in half inch on both the lining and fabric, and I gave it a good press. So this is what I now have for the collar. So the next thing we're going to do is to sew it to the neckline. So first I'm going to hold the neckline into two and just notch it. So So this is the center front. For the collar, the part that is going to serve as the lining, which is this part, I will also hold it into two like this, just fold into two, and then get the midpoint as well, and then I'll notch it. This is so that when pinning, everything will sit very well. So this is the wrong side of our gown. That's from the reverse side here. I'm going to place this like this. I'll also pin it this way. I'll pin it like this. You see? So I'll do the same thing for the other side. So now I'll take this to my sewing machine. You can see my half-inch sewing allowance is appearing here. So I'll take this to my sewing machine and I'll stitch it this way, all the way to the end here. After doing that, I'll now flip it this way, like this, and top stitch it. But before top stitching it, I'm going to place it this way and then stitch this half-inch seam allowance. I'll repeat the same thing on the other side and then turn it to the right side and top stitch it. And I'll come back and show us the final outcome of our gown. So this is what our gown looks like after stitching the collar to the neckline. I also went ahead to tack bra hook to hold the collar together here. This is optional because this collar will fit well on the neck whether you fix this or not, but as a way of keeping it in place. And then I also went ahead to tack my cover buttons. This is just fancy buttons. You can see we just tacked it on the area where we have the plackets, and I also fixed one here at the pocket area. I did the same thing here. You can see how beautiful it turned out. So I'm going to wear this outfit on the mannequin so that we can see the final outcome. So here we are. This is the final outcome of our gown. You can see how beautiful it came out. The cover button is really adding to the beauty. Everything came out so beautiful. You can see our collar, the basic sleeve, the fancy pocket, the pleats. Everything about this gown is beautiful. I hope you learned something from this video. If you did, please make sure to like this video, share this video with your friends, and do not forget to subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Thank you so much and see you in my next video. Bye.